Welcome to this peaceful moment. A place where you can slow down, breathe, and let your body relax. Take a deep breath in and let it go slowly. Feel the tension begin to fade, little by little. I'm glad you're here, and if you enjoy this kind of calming content, feel free to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next sessions. Now, let's begin our journey unto relaxation and calm in the ancient times. Before mountains were engraved on the face of the earth, and before the winds knew the names of the seas, gigantic creatures were born on this land. Their steps shook the soil every time they took a stride. Each one of them was as tall as an ancient tree, and their eyes glowed with the color of molten copper. They lived in wide valleys covered with old mists, while the early humans, weak and small compared to them, searched for their food among rocks and the roots of plants. Humans at that time believed that the giants were created from the anger of the earth itself, and that they knew no mercy and could not distinguish between a tree or a creature. They hunted without limits, picking up whatever stood before them, and if a small human happened to pass in the path of one of them, he would be crushed just like a flower, crushed beneath a stone. One night, when the moon was full and white, floating above the plains, the wise elders of the humans gathered around a small fire flickering in the heart of darkness. The eldest among them, whose skin had cracked like thirsty land, said, "We will not remain hunted forever. We must learn how to hide ourselves from their eyes and how to make the earth protect us from them." From that night, the journey of adaptation began. They dug shelters in the cliffs of mountains and learned how to weave mud and grass to create sounds similar to the roars of predatory animals. And they released them to mislead the giants. They moved at night, and they walked against the direction of the wind so that their scent would not reach the noses of those colossal creatures. But the giants did not remain unaware for long. On a stormy morning, one of them discovered a human shelter inside a rocky crack. The earth trembled under his feet as he roared. The humans fled in every direction, leaving their shadows dancing like frightened wings. And from that day, the great chase began, one that generations remembered for long ages. Humans ran, knowing they could not match the strides of the giants. But they possessed what the giants did not: intelligence. They climbed into the land of ancient lava, where the rocks were sharp and the pits deep. Giants hated walking there, for the ground cracked beneath their weight, and the pits swallowed them one after another. Many long days passed until the last giant stopped at the edge of the lava land, gazing at the humans standing on the black rocks, exhausted but steadfast. He released a thunderous cry, then retreated, leaving behind enormous footprints that remained carved in the earth for thousands of years. And since that time, the early humans became known not for the strength of their bodies, but for an ancient secret they carried into later ages, He who knows fear can flee, but he who knows wisdom can survive. After the last giant withdrew from the land of lava, humans believed the chase had ended, and that the nights would return to their quiet stillness, just as they were before the appearance of those towering shadows. But they soon discovered that the earth does not forget the weight of those who walked upon it, and that giants never retreat except to return stronger. Only a few weeks passed before strange signs began to appear along the edges of the valleys. Broken trees as if struck by a violent storm, shattered rocks, and the smell of overturned soil drifting in the wind. All of them were clues to the passing of something enormous. Humans understood then that the giants had taken a new path, searching for them from a direction they had never expected.
One night,
as thick fog lay over the plains like a gray blanket, the people heard a low, distant sound, something that resembled the rumble of thunder. Though the sky was clear, the sound approached slowly, step by heavy step, until its echo vibrated through the walls of their stone shelters. A brave young man named Aaron stepped outside to see what was happening. When he reached the edge of a nearby hill, he saw a sight that froze his breath. There were 3 giants this time. Not one. They moved with caution, their massive heads turning from side to side, as if following a trail or searching for something they had lost long ago. Aaron rushed back to the shelter, panting, and told the elders what he had seen. Silence filled the cave, until an old woman with a rough, deep voice whispered, "They have not come to hunt. These are the steps of those searching for land or a home. The earth has changed, and perhaps they have changed with it." Her words lingered in the dim firelight as the tribe listened, their fear slowly shifting into a realization. What if the giants were not simply predators? What if they, too, were creatures struggling to survive in a world that was no longer theirs? Outside, the fog thickened, swallowing the horizon, and somewhere within that white silence, the giants continued their slow, steady search, each step echoing like a warning from an age the world had tried to forget. The night stretched long and heavy. No one inside the shelter slept. The quiet murmur of fear moved from one person to another like a cold breath. Outside, the fog pressed against the entrance of the cave, and every now and then, a deep vibration rolled beneath the ground, proof that the giants had not gone far. At dawn, a pale light seeped through the mist. Aaron and 2 hunters crept out to observe the land. The valley below was scarred, long trenches in the soil, uprooted trees, and giant footprints filled with water from the night dew. What troubled them most was not the destruction, but the direction the prints were leading. They were circling the valley, quietly, systematically, as if the giants were mapping the land, learning its shape, its paths, its hiding places. Aaron whispered, They are searching for something they expect to find here. One of the hunters, older and wary, shook his head slowly. Or someone. By midday, the fog lifted, revealing a distant shape on the far ridge. One of the giants standing still, watching the valley. He wasn't moving. He seemed to be waiting, listening to something only he could hear. His massive chest rose and fell slowly, like a hill breathing, then, without warning, he lifted his arm and pointed. Not at the valley, not at the plains, but directly toward the cliffs where humans hid. A deep, trembling sound escaped his throat. Not a roar, not a threat, but something unfamiliar. A call, a signal. Moments later, the other two giants answered from far away, their voices echoing through the canyons like rolling storms. The elders felt the vibrations inside the cave. The old woman leaned on her staff and whispered, "They have found us." But what followed was stranger still. The giants did not charge. They did not break trees or hurl stones or run toward the caves. Instead, they gathered on the plain beneath the cliffs, forming a wide circle. Then they knelt, all three of them, placing their enormous hands on the ground as if performing some ancient rite. The humans watched, confused and trembling. Never before had giants behaved this way. Aaron stepped forward, heart pounding, unable to look away. The giants lowered their heads. The earth hummed beneath their palms. Small stones shifted. Dust rose. A faint glow pulsed from the soil. Something was awakening. Something older than giants. Older than humans. Older than the mountains themselves. Aaron felt it ripple through his bones. "This," he whispered. "This is why they returned." The ground continued to pulse gently, like the heartbeat of something sleeping deep beneath the earth. Dust swirled around the kneeling giants as if drawn toward an unseen force. The humans watched from the cliffs, torn between terror and a strange, growing curiosity. Aaron felt the vibration travel up through the stones beneath his feet. He whispered, barely breathing, "There's something under us, something alive." The old woman closed her eyes as if searching her memory for a forgotten tale. "There were stories," she murmured, "spoken when I was a child. Stories of the first ground, where the earth kept memories of the earliest beings. It was said that giants were not the first to walk this world. They were only the last to remember what came before." Before anyone could question her, a deep crack sounded through the valley, a long, slow splitting of stone. A line appeared in the soil beneath the giants, stretching outward like a jagged root. The giants did not move. They pressed their hands deeper into the earth, their massive shoulders trembling with effort. Aaron's breath caught. From the crack, a faint column of warm air rose, carrying with it a scent unlike anything he had known, ancient, metallic, almost like lightning before a storm. The light beneath the ground grew brighter. One of the giants let out a low, rumbling sound, half chant, half lament. The others joined him, their voices merging into a deep, resonant harmony that shook dust from the cliffside. The sound was not aggressive, it was mournful, desperate, as if the giants were pleading with the earth itself. "That is no call of war," whispered one of the hunters. "They are praying." The old woman's eyes opened sharply. "No, not praying, summoning." Suddenly, the crack widened with a thunderous jolt. The cliffs trembled. Humans stumbled back, and a surge of hot air burst upward like a breath from a sleeping colossus. A deep silhouette appeared beneath the ground, shifting slowly, impossibly massive. Aron's heart hammered against his ribs. "What is that?" he whispered. The old woman swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "Something the giants fear more than we fear them." A rumble rolled through the valley, deeper and more ancient than anything they had heard before. The giants immediately lowered their heads to the ground in submission, like children before a forgotten parent. The earth shuddered again, and far below, something began to wake. The valley fell into a silence so absolute that even the wind seemed afraid to move. Every creature, bird, insect, human, held its breath. The earth was no longer merely trembling. It was breathing, drawing in long, ancient gulps of air from cracks that had not opened in thousands of years. Aron felt the heat rising from the widening fissure below. It washed across his face like the breath of a giant furnace, carrying with it a distant, echoing sound, something like grinding stone or the slow turning of mountains. A shape stirred beneath the ground. Not a figure, not a limb, but an outline so vast it blurred the edges of the valley itself. One of the giants lifted his head, eyes glowing with fear, a rare, unmistakable fear that no human had ever seen in them. He made a sharp gesture with his hand, urging the other giants to rise. But the earth pulsed again. Boom! A sound that rolled through the bones of everyone present. The giants instantly folded back to their knees, their bodies trembling. Whatever lay beneath them commanded obedience. Aron felt a cold dread slide across his spine. "If giants kneel," he whispered, "what kind of being must this be?" The old woman gripped her staff so tightly her knuckles whitened. "The first ones," she said softly. "The giants were not the rulers of the early world, only its guardians. Beneath this land sleeps one of the beings who shaped the soil itself." The fissure split wider, the heat pouring out in waves, and for a heartbeat, Aron glimpsed something inside. A massive form curled beneath layers of stone, scales or plates. He could not tell. A glow spreading under its surface like molten veins. A slumbering colossus as old as the world's first storms. The valley shook with another tremor. One of the giants leaned forward, pressing his forehead to the ground. His voice boomed, not in aggression, but in ritual. A plea, Arathor. The name trembled through the air like thunder rolled into a single word. The ground responded. A deep, thunderous exhale erupted from the fissure, sending dust spiraling into the sky. The humans stumbled back, shielding their eyes. A roar followed, a sound so low it seemed to vibrate the bloodstream, shaking the cliffs, the trees, the very shape of the horizon. The slumbering being beneath the earth was awakening. The old woman whispered, "A creature from the world before ours, before the giants, before anything walked upright." Suddenly, the fissure snapped wider. Rocks exploded outward. A blast of scorching air knocked Aaron to the ground, and an enormous, glowing eye opened beneath the earth. It was not the eye of a beast, nor of a giant. It was something older, something elemental. Aaron met its gaze for one paralyzing moment. He felt an overwhelming pressure inside his skull. Images flashing in an instant. Mountains forming, oceans boiling, stars falling, giants bowing, humans fleeing. And then, darkness swallowing everything. The vision vanished as quickly as it came. Aaron lay gasping, trembling, staring at the glowing eye. The earth shook once more. And then, the ancient being began to rise. The glowing eye sank back for a moment, as though measuring the world above it, measuring the giants, the valley, the tiny humans trembling along the cliff. The ground beneath Aaron's hands felt warm now, pulsing like the heartbeat of some enormous creature buried only a few breaths beneath the soil. A deep, grinding sound rumbled through the valley. Not an eruption, not a collapse, a shift, as if the earth itself were moving aside. The fissure widened, pushing rock and soil outward in slow, deliberate waves. Chunks of ancient stone, older than any human memory, rose and fell like drifting embers around a forge. Aaron staggered to his feet, the heat pressing against his skin near the valley floor. One of the giants, a massive figure with cracked, stone-like skin, lifted his head and growled something guttural and rhythmic. It was not a warning, it was a chant, a ritual. All the giants joined him in that deep, trembling chorus. Their voices shook the air, blending with the pulsing earth. The valley seemed to hum with their resonance. Above them, dust spiraled like silver threads in the heated currents. The old woman's eyes widened. "They are not calling him," she whispered. "They are begging him to sleep." Aaron's stomach tightened. If beings of such size, beings who feared nothing, were pleading for the Ancient One to remain buried, then waking it must be a disaster beyond comprehension. The fissure suddenly split into a perfect circle, as if shaped by unseen hands, and a massive structure emerged from below. Not flesh, not bone. A colossal stone crest, carved with swirling, ancient patterns that pulsed with molten light. It towered high enough to cast a shadow across half the valley. Slowly, the crest lifted further, revealing a curved surface beneath, smooth, dark, and scaled, each plate the size of a human hut. The molten glow from within its fissures traced patterns across the surface like veins of fire. Arin's voice quivered. "Is it a creature?" The old woman shook her head. "It is more than a creature. A being that slumbered through the shaping of continents. A force of the early world. Before giants roamed, before humans stood upright." The crest rose again, a massive, slow movement, impossibly heavy yet deliberate. Beneath it, the ground cracked from the weight. The air shimmered with heat. One giant, braver or more desperate than the others, stood tall and hurled a thunderous shout toward the fissure. A challenge or a warning. The valley responded with an explosion of steam and fire. A wave of scorching heat blasted outward, sweeping the giant off his feet and sending shock waves through the mountainsides. Trees ignited instantly. Rocks glowed red. The ground rippled like liquid. Arin and the others shielded themselves behind a ledge, feeling the air recoil with boiling fury. When the steam cleared, the ancient being had risen higher. 2 more glowing eyes opened. Then a third. Its gaze swept the valley. Slow, deliberate, intelligent. Arin felt as if the world itself had stopped breathing. The giants fell silent, bowing deeply, pressing their foreheads to the scorched earth. But the Ancient One was not looking at them. Its massive, luminous eyes had turned toward the human standing on the cliff, toward Arin. The old woman grasped his arm. In her voice trembled a fear so deep it cracked her whisper. "It remembers humans." The air fell still. "And it doesn't remember us kindly." The ancient being's eyes, those enormous, molten spheres, focused on Arin with a depth that felt impossibly old. They were not angry, nor curious. They were remembering. Arin felt a sudden weight press against his mind, as if an invisible hand had reached through the air and was turning the pages of his thoughts. He gasped, his knees buckling. The old woman clutched him, trying to pull him back, but the force was overwhelming. Images flooded his vision. Not dreams, not imagination, but memories that were not his. A world of burning skies, colossal beings shaping valleys with their hands, humans fleeing across plains of ash, and the Ancient One, towering above them all, issuing judgment with fire. Arin tore his gaze away and collapsed to the ground. Breathless, He felt the lingering echo of the ancient being's presence inside his mind. Like a fading tremor. Below, the giants stood again, slowly, reluctantly. Their bodies were rigid with terror. Yet they positioned themselves between the humans and the rising colossus. One giant slammed his fist into the earth, producing a deep thud that echoed through the mountains, a signal, a warning. Another giant lifted a massive stone slab, carved with symbols that glowed faintly, holding it as if it were a shield. A third giant raised his voice in a roar that shook dust from the cliffs. But the Ancient One did not react to them. Its eyes were fixed on the human still. The old woman spoke stiffly, her voice breaking. It remembers the first humans, the ones who defied it. Those who tried to steal fire from its domain. It thinks we are them. A crack appeared along the creature's massive crest, spreading in a line of molten light. And for the first time, part of its true form emerged from beneath the earth. A vast, armored head rose, covered in plates like volcanic rock. Steam hissed between its scales. Every movement shifted the ground like an earthquake. Oren tried to stand, but the force pushing him down was almost physical. "Why is it focusing on us?" he whispered. The old woman didn't answer immediately. Her eyes widened, and she slowly turned toward him as if seeing something beyond her understanding. "Aren, it's not looking at all humans. It's looking at you." He froze. "Me? Why?" Before she could respond, the ancient being moved. A slow, monumental motion, dash, dash. The kind that made mountains seem fragile, as its head rotated toward the cliff where Aren stood. The giants immediately shifted, forming a wall between the humans and the creature. Their voices thundered in unison, chanting something old and desperate. The ground trembled beneath their feet. The ancient being exhaled, not fire, but a wave of scorching air that washed over the valley like the breath of a dying star. The giants braced themselves, digging their massive hands into the earth to remain standing. The chant grew louder, resonating through the valley, echoing off the cliffs. Oren felt the vibrations in his chest. The Ancient One paused. For a moment, just a moment, it seemed to consider the giant's plea. Then, a sound like a cracking mountain split the air. The ancient being unfurled its crest fully, a massive, radiant shell that reflected molten light across the valley, and the earth quaked violently beneath it. The old woman's voice rose above the tremors. "Aren, listen to me carefully. Whatever it sees in you is something ancient, something it fears, or something it hates." Aren swallowed hard, heart pounding. "What do I do?" Her eyes met his with a mix of fear and certainty. "You must find out what it wants, because if we don't stop it now, the giants, the valley, and all humans beyond these mountains will burn.